The small town of Maple Ridge was no stranger to harsh winters. But this year, the weather had decided to show off its full might. The snowstorm rolled in like an uninvited guest that overstayed its welcome. It started with light flurries, almost playful as if teasing the townsfolk. But by evening it turned into a monstrous blizzard, swallowing everything in its path. Roads disappeared under layers of snow. Power lines groaned under the weight, and people huddled indoors waiting for the storm to pass. Ethan Carter wasn't one to sit idle during such chaos. He owned a tiny auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, a place where old cars went to get another lease on life. Ethan himself wasn't much different from those vehicles. He'd seen his fair share of breakdowns and repairs over the years. Life hadn't been kind to him lately. His business was barely staying afloat, and loneliness had become his constant companion. Still, he found comfort in fixing things, whether it was a busted engine or a broken fence post at his modest home. That night, as Ethan locked up his garage, he noticed something unusual. Through the thick curtain of falling snow, faint headlights flickered in the distance. At first, he thought it might just be his imagination playing tricks on him. After all, who would be foolish enough to venture out in this mess? But then he saw it again, a dim glow struggling against the storm. Curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he was trudging through knee-deep snow toward the highway. Each step felt heavier than the last, the biting wind cutting through his thick coat like knives. By the time he reached the source of the headlights, his cheeks were red, and his breath came out in ragged puffs. There, stuck in a massive snowdrift, was a sleek luxury sedan. Its tires spun uselessly, digging deeper into the icy trap. The car looked completely out of place in this rugged landscape, like a diamond dropped into a pile of gravel. Ethan knocked on the driver's window, startling the person inside. When the glass slid down, he found himself face to face with a woman bundled up in a fur-lined coat. Her hair was tucked neatly under a woolen hat, but her eyes told a story of exhaustion and frustration. She introduced herself as Clara Bennett, explaining that she'd been trying to reach her family in a nearby town when the storm hit. Her GPS had failed her, and now she was stranded, miles away from civilization. Clara's voice carried a hint of panic, though she tried hard to mask it. "I don't know what to do," she admitted, clutching the steering wheel tightly. "My phone died hours ago, and I haven't seen another car since I got stuck." Ethan nodded sympathetically. He'd lived in Maple Ridge his entire life and knew how unforgiving these storms could be. Without hesitation, he reassured her, "Don't worry, I'll help you get out of here." He hurried back to his garage to fetch his tow truck, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts. As she watched him disappear into the swirling snow, she couldn't help but wonder about the man who seemed so willing to risk his own safety for a complete stranger. There was something genuine about him, something rare in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. When Ethan returned with the tow truck, he worked quickly despite the freezing temperatures. Using chains and sheer determination, he managed to pull Clara's car free from the snowdrift. The engine sputtered back to life, eliciting a sigh of relief from both of them. However, the ordeal wasn't over yet. With the road still treacherous and visibility near zero, driving further was out of the question. "Come with me," Ethan said firmly, opening the passenger door of his tow truck. "You can stay at my place until the storm passes." Clara hesitated for a moment, unsure if accepting his offer was wise. But the alternative, freezing to death in her car, was far worse. So she climbed into the warmth of the truck, grateful for his kindness. As they drove back to Ethan's cabin-like home, the silence between them was filled only by the hum of the engine and the relentless howl of the wind. Despite their vastly different lives, there was an unspoken understanding between them. Sometimes survival depends not on wealth or status, but on the simple act of trusting another human being. And in that moment, surrounded by chaos and uncertainty, both Ethan and Clara felt a glimmer of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest storms, humanity has a way of shining through. Ethan's home was nothing fancy, a modest cabin nestled at the edge of the woods. It had a cozy charm with its wooden walls and a stone fireplace that crackled softly in the corner. The moment they stepped inside, Clara felt an immediate sense of warmth, not just from the fire, but from the simplicity of the space. There were no expensive gadgets or designer furniture, just worn-out armchairs, shelves cluttered with books, and tools neatly arranged on hooks near the door. It was clear this was a place where life happened without pretense. "Make yourself comfortable," Ethan said, brushing snow off his boots before hanging his coat by the door. "I'll grab some blankets and get us something warm to drink." Clara nodded, still trying to process how quickly her evening had turned upside down. Just hours ago, she'd been cruising along a highway, confident she'd reach her destination before the storm worsened. Now, here she was, sitting in a stranger's living room, grateful for his kindness. She glanced around, taking in the details, the faded photographs on the walls, the mismatched mugs lined up on the kitchen counter, and the faint smell of oil lingering in the air. This wasn't the kind of lifestyle she was used to, yet there was something oddly comforting about it. Ethan returned with 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa, handing one to Clara with a small smile. "It's not much, but it'll warm you up," he said, settling into the chair across from her. "Thank you," Clara replied, wrapping her hands around the mug. The heat seeped through her fingers, chasing away the chill that had settled deep in her bones. For a while, neither of them spoke, content to sip their drinks and listen to the crackling fire. But as the silence stretched on, curiosity got the better of both of them. "So, what brings you out here in the middle of nowhere?" Ethan asked casually, leaning back in his chair. "Not many people take this route unless they're lost or desperate." Clara chuckled softly, though there was a hint of nervousness in her laugh. "Lost is definitely the right word," she admitted. "I was heading to visit my aunt. She lives in a town about an hour from here, but the GPS messed up, and I ended up veering off course. Then the storm hit, and..." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Let's just say it hasn't been my best day." Ethan nodded knowingly. "Storms like this can sneak up on you if you're not careful. We don't get many visitors around here, especially during winter. Most folks know better than to come out unless they have to." "Well, I guess I'm not most folks," Clara said with a wry smile. Her tone softened as she added, "But I'm glad I ran into you. If you hadn't stopped, I don't even want to think about what might have happened." Ethan waved off, her gratitude with a dismissive gesture. "Anyone would have done the same. You can't leave someone stranded out there in this weather." His words struck a chord with Clara. In the fast-paced world she came from, acts of genuine kindness often felt rare, almost transactional. People helped each other when it benefited them or when they expected something in return. But Ethan didn't seem to be operating under those rules. His actions were selfless, driven purely by concern for another person's well-being. Curious to learn more about him, Clara asked, "Do you live here alone? Seems quiet out here." "Yeah, it's just me," Ethan replied, his expression thoughtful. "Used to be my dad's place. He passed away a few years back, so now it's mine. I keep busy with the garage and fixing things around here. Keeps me out of trouble, I guess." Clara could hear the undertone of loneliness in his voice, though he tried to mask it with nonchalance. She wondered what it must be like to live such a solitary life, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city she called home. Yet, despite the isolation, there was a quiet strength about Ethan, a resilience that came from facing challenges head-on. "What about you?" Ethan asked, turning the conversation back to her. "You said you're visiting family, but you don't strike me as someone who spends Christmas in small towns." Clara hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. On one hand, she didn't want to come across as boastful or distant. On the other hand, lying felt wrong, especially after everything Ethan had done for her. Finally, she settled on a version of the truth. "I work in finance," she began slowly. "Managing investments, that sort of thing. My job keeps me in the city most of the time, but every once in a while I try to get away. Family helps remind me what really matters, you know?" Ethan nodded, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of skepticism. He'd met enough people in suits to recognize the type, ambitious, driven, and often disconnected from the simpler joys of life. But there was something different about Clara. Maybe it was the way she listened intently when he spoke, or the sincerity in her voice when she talked about her family. Whatever it was, it made him want to believe she wasn't like the others. As the night wore on, their conversation flowed effortlessly. They swapped stories about their childhoods, laughing over shared memories of scraped knees and embarrassing moments. Ethan told her about the time he accidentally set his high school science project on fire, earning him detention for a week. Clara countered with a tale of her own, recounting how she'd gotten lost in a department store as a child and ended up eating free samples until someone found her. By the time they finally drifted off to sleep, Clara on the couch, wrapped in blankets, and Ethan stretched out on the floor, they felt like old friends rather than strangers brought together by chance. The storm outside continued to rage, but inside the little cabin there was a sense of calm that neither of them had felt in a long time. When morning arrived, the world outside looked transformed. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a pristine blanket of snow that sparkled in the sunlight. Trees stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with frost. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a reminder of nature's ability to create beauty even in destruction. Ethan woke first, quietly stoking the fire and brewing a fresh pot of coffee. When Clara emerged from the living room, rubbing sleep from her eyes, he greeted her with a grin. "Morning. Looks like the worst of it's over. I checked your car earlier. It should be good to go whenever you're ready." Clara smiled, feeling a pang of gratitude mixed with reluctance. Part of her didn't want to leave this peaceful retreat, where life felt slower and more meaningful. But she knew she couldn't stay forever. After breakfast, Ethan helped her load up her car and gave her directions to her aunt's house, ensuring she wouldn't get lost again. Before driving away, Clara turned to Ethan one last time. "I can't thank you enough for everything," she said sincerely. "If you're ever in the city, look me up. I'd love to return the favor." She handed him a business card scribbled with her personal number, then climbed into her car and drove off. Ethan watched her go, the card clutched loosely in his hand. He doubted he'd ever use it, but something about the encounter lingered in his mind, a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can lead to unexpected connections. Life in Maple Ridge quickly returned to its usual rhythm after the storm. The snow that had once blanketed the town began to melt under the pale winter sun, revealing patches of muddy ground and soggy grass. For Ethan, things went back to normal, too, or at least as normal as they could be for someone who spent his days fixing cars and avoiding thoughts about the bigger picture. He tucked Clara's business card into a drawer in his kitchen, almost forgetting it existed. After all, what did someone like her, a woman from the city with a life so different from his, have to do with him? But deep down, something lingered. It wasn't just the memory of their conversation or the warmth of the fire that night. It was the way she had listened to him, really listened, as if every word mattered. In the weeks that followed, Ethan found himself replaying bits of their talk over and over in his mind. Her laugh echoed in his head during quiet moments, and he caught himself wondering what she was doing now, miles away in her world of finance and fancy suits. At first, he tried to brush it off. "She's probably busy running some big company," he muttered to himself one evening while tinkering with an old truck in his garage. "Why would she even remember me?" But no matter how hard he tried to convince himself otherwise, there was a part of him that couldn't let go of the connection they'd shared. It wasn't love, not yet anyway, but it was something deeper than mere curiosity. It felt like hope. Meanwhile, in the city, Clara was adjusting back to her fast-paced life. Her office was perched high above the streets, offering a panoramic view of skyscrapers and bustling traffic. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. Sleek suits, important meetings, and endless streams of emails demanding her attention. But inside, she couldn't shake the image of Ethan standing by his tow truck, his face red from the cold but his eyes full of kindness. She thought about the simplicity of his home, the crackling fire, and the easy way they'd talked late into the night. It was a stark contrast to the polished but often impersonal interactions she dealt with daily. One afternoon, as Clara sat at her desk reviewing investment portfolios, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a reminder from her assistant about upcoming charity events and networking opportunities. Normally, these were tasks she handled without a second thought, but this time, her mind wandered. What if she could use her resources to make a difference in places like Maple Ridge? What if she could help people like Ethan, hardworking, humble individuals who didn't ask for handouts but deserved a chance to thrive? The idea took root in her mind, growing stronger with each passing day. By the end of the week, Clara had drafted a plan. She decided to set up a scholarship fund aimed at supporting small businesses in rural areas. And though she hadn't told anyone, not even her closest colleagues, she already knew exactly who the first recipient would be. Back in Maple Ridge, Ethan was elbow-deep in grease when the letter arrived. It came on a gray, overcast morning, the kind where the sky looked heavy enough to collapse at any moment. The envelope bore the logo of a prestigious investment firm, its gold lettering glinting faintly in the dim light. At first, Ethan assumed it was junk mail meant for someone else. Who would send him something like this? But then he noticed his name handwritten neatly in the corner and decided to open it. Inside was a formal letter addressed to him personally. As Ethan read through the contents, his heart skipped a beat. The letter explained that a scholarship fund had been established in his name, complete with a check large enough to cover all his debts and provide seed money for a dream he'd long abandoned, opening his own auto repair shop. Attached to the letter was a note written in familiar handwriting. It was from Clara. "Ethan," the note began, "I know we come from different worlds, but meeting you reminded me of the importance of helping others achieve their dreams. This is my way of saying thank you for your kindness, your honesty, and for reminding me of what truly matters. Please take this opportunity and chase your ambitions. You deserve it." Ethan stared at the words, his mind racing. He reread the letter 3 times before the reality sank in. Clara, the same woman he'd helped during the storm, had gone out of her way to change his life. His throat tightened as emotions bubbled to the surface. Gratitude, disbelief, and a sense of responsibility he hadn't felt in years. For a long time he sat motionless, the letter clutched tightly in his hands. Then, driven by impulse, he reached for the phone and dialed the number on the business card she'd given him. After a few rings, her voice answered, calm and professional. Clara Bennett speaking. "It's Ethan," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "From Maple Ridge." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a soft laugh. "Ethan, I was hoping you'd call. Did you get the letter?" "I did," he replied, still trying to process everything. I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't feel like enough." "You don't have to thank me," Clara said warmly. "You earned this. All I did was give you a push, the rest is up to you." They talked for nearly an hour, catching up like old friends. Ethan told her about his plans to open a repair shop, not just to fix cars, but to teach local kids valuable skills. Clara listened intently, offering advice and encouragement. By the end of the call, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose, a spark he hadn't felt in years. Over the next few months, Ethan threw himself into making his dream a reality. With Clara's support, he secured a larger space for his business, hired a couple of helpers from town, and invested in better equipment. Word spread quickly about Carter's auto repair and custom builds. People appreciated his honest work, ethic, and fair prices, and soon the shop became a hub of activity. Ethan also started mentoring teenagers interested in mechanics, teaching them everything he knew and giving them a glimpse of a future they might not have considered otherwise. Despite his success, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Clara. Their calls and messages became a regular part of his routine, a bright spot in his otherwise hectic schedule. Each conversation brought them closer, bridging the gap between their two worlds. Clara admired Ethan's determination and humility, while Ethan found inspiration in Clara's generosity and vision. One day, as Ethan stood in his newly renovated shop watching a group of kids tinker with an old engine, he realized something profound. Meeting Clara hadn't just changed his financial situation. It had reignited his belief in the power of human connection. Their chance encounter in the snowstorm had sparked a chain reaction, leading to opportunities neither of them could have predicted. And as he wiped his greasy hands on a rag and smiled at the laughter filling the room, Ethan knew this was only the beginning. Months passed, and Ethan's life began to transform in ways he could never have imagined. The repair shop flourished, becoming more than just a place to fix cars. It turned into a community hub. People from all over town would stop by, not just for repairs but to chat, share stories, or simply watch the kids learning how to tinker with engines. Ethan had always been a quiet man, content to stay in the background while life moved around him. But now, he found himself at the center of it all, guiding and inspiring others. He felt alive in a way that made him realize how much he'd been missing before. The mentoring program became his pride and joy. Every Saturday morning, a group of teenagers gathered in the back corner of the shop, where Ethan set up workbenches and tools specifically for them. They came from different walks of life, some struggling in school, others unsure about their futures. But they all shared one thing: curiosity. Ethan taught them not only how to diagnose problems and rebuild engines, but also the importance of perseverance, teamwork, and taking pride in their work. One boy, barely 16, stood out to Ethan. His name was Tommy, and he reminded Ethan of himself at that age, awkward, unsure, and hungry for something meaningful. Tommy had a knack for mechanics, picking up skills faster than anyone else in the group. More importantly, he showed up every week, rain or shine, eager to learn. Watching Tommy grow gave Ethan a sense of fulfillment he hadn't experienced since his own father taught him the basics of car repair years ago. Despite the busyness of his days, Ethan often thought about Clara. Their conversations continued regularly, sometimes brief check-ins during her lunch breaks, other times long talks, late into the night when both were winding down after hectic schedules. Through these exchanges, Ethan learned more about Clara's world, the pressures of running a successful firm, the constant demands on her time, and the loneliness that occasionally crept in despite being surrounded by people. She confided in him about moments when she doubted herself, wondering if she was making a real difference in the lives of others or just going through the motions. "You're doing incredible work," Ethan told her once during one of their calls. "Look at what you've done for me, for this town. That's not nothing." Clara laughed softly, though there was gratitude in her tone. "It's easy to help someone like you, Ethan. You make it worthwhile." Their bond deepened with each passing day. While their lives couldn't have been more different, one rooted in the simplicity of small-town living, the other navigating the complexities of corporate success, they discovered they shared core values: kindness, resilience, and a desire to leave the world better than they found it. These common threads wove them together, creating a connection that transcended their circumstances. As spring arrived, bringing warmer weather and longer days, Ethan started thinking about visiting Clara in the city. It wasn't just curiosity driving him. He wanted to thank her in person, to show her firsthand the impact of her generosity. For weeks, he debated whether it was a good idea. What would he even say? Would she be too busy to see him? Eventually, he decided to take the leap. After all, Clara had taken a chance on him. Why shouldn't he do the same? He called her one evening, trying to sound casual. "Hey, I was thinking, maybe I should come visit sometime, if you're free, that is." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a warm chuckle. "Are you serious? Of course you should come. When can you make it?" They settled on a weekend a few weeks away, giving Ethan time to arrange things at the shop and prepare mentally for the trip. As the date approached, excitement mixed with nerves. He'd never been to the city before, let alone stepped foot in the kind of towering office buildings Clara worked in. The thought of walking into her world felt daunting, but also exhilarating. When the day finally came, Ethan packed a bag and drove to the nearest train station. The journey itself was an adventure, a blur of landscapes shifting from rolling hills to dense urban sprawl. By the time he arrived in the city, the towering skyscrapers and endless streams of people left him awestruck. Everything moved so fast here, unlike the slow, deliberate pace of Maple Ridge. For a moment he wondered if he'd stick out like a sore thumb, but then he remembered Clara waiting for him. She greeted him outside her building, dressed in a tailored suit that screamed professionalism yet softened by the genuine smile lighting up her face. "You made it," she said, pulling him into a quick hug. "Welcome to my world." Ethan laughed nervously, looking around at the sea of strangers rushing past. "It's overwhelming, to say the least." "I know," Clara replied sympathetically. "But don't worry, I'll guide you through it." True to her word, Clara took him under her wing, showing him the highlights of the city. They walked through bustling streets lined with shops and restaurants, visited parks bursting with greenery, and even stopped at a rooftop cafe overlooking the skyline. At every turn, Ethan marveled at the energy of the place, the hum of activity, the diversity of people, and the sheer scale of everything. Yet, as impressive as it was, he couldn't help but feel relieved knowing he didn't have to live like this every day. That evening, over dinner at a cozy Italian restaurant, they talked about their dreams and aspirations. Clara shared her vision of expanding her foundation to reach more communities like Maple Ridge, while Ethan opened up about his hopes for the repair shop and mentoring program. "I want to give kids a chance to see what they're capable of," he explained earnestly, "to show them that hard work pays off no matter where you start." Clara nodded, her eyes shining with admiration. "That's exactly why I believe in you, Ethan. You inspire people without even realizing it." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, blending laughter with moments of quiet reflection. As dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate cake they split. Between them, Ethan realized something important. Clara wasn't just a benefactor or a distant friend anymore. She was someone who truly understood him, flaws and all. And in return, he saw her not as some untouchable figure, but as a human being with fears, hopes, and dreams of her own. By the time the weekend ended, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. Visiting Clara's world hadn't intimidated him as much as he'd feared. It had inspired him. He returned to Maple Ridge with fresh ideas for the shop and a deeper appreciation for the connection they'd forged. Meanwhile, Clara found herself reflecting on the simplicity and authenticity Ethan brought into her life. In helping him, she had rediscovered a part of herself she'd almost forgotten existed. Neither of them knew exactly where their journey would lead, but one thing was certain. Their paths were intertwined now, bound by mutual respect, gratitude, and the promise of greater things to come. Ethan returned to Maple Ridge with a suitcase full of memories and a heart brimming with inspiration. The city had been overwhelming, yes, but it had also opened his eyes to new possibilities. He couldn't stop thinking about the rooftop cafe, where he and Clara had sat, watching the sunset paint the skyline in shades of orange and pink, or the way she had introduced him to her colleagues, not as the guy I helped, but as someone whose work mattered, whose contributions were making a real difference. It wasn't just the sights or sounds of the city that stayed with him. It was the realization that their connection went beyond gratitude. They were partners in a shared mission, even if they came from different worlds. Back at the repair shop, Ethan threw himself into his work with renewed energy. The mentoring program expanded thanks to ideas he'd picked up during his visit to the city. He started organizing weekend workshops, inviting local business owners to speak to the kids about entrepreneurship and career paths. One Saturday, a retired mechanic named Joe, who had once taught Ethan a thing or two, stopped by to share stories of how he'd built his own garage from scratch. The kids listened intently, their eyes wide with wonder, imagining themselves doing the same someday. But Ethan didn't stop there. Inspired by Clara's vision of helping underserved communities, he began reaching out to nearby towns, offering free basic car maintenance lessons for teenagers. Word spread quickly, and soon families were driving from miles away to enroll their kids in the program. Ethan found joy in seeing parents beam with pride as their children learned skills that could lead to jobs, or at least help them avoid costly repairs down the road. Still, no matter how busy life got, Ethan made time to stay in touch with Clara. Their calls became a lifeline for both of them, a chance to step away from the chaos of their respective worlds and reconnect over simple, honest conversations. Sometimes they talked about big dreams, expanding the foundation, finding new ways to support struggling communities, or even collaborating on projects that combined their strengths. Other times, their chats were lighter, filled with jokes and updates about their daily lives. Once, Ethan teased her about surviving on coffee and takeout lunches, while she laughed about how messy his workshop must be compared to her polished office. "I bet your desk is covered in tools and oil stains," she joked during one call. "Hey, don't knock it," Ethan shot back with a grin. "At least I know how to fix things when they break." Clara chuckled, then added thoughtfully, "You're right. That's something I admire about you, Ethan. You see problems as challenges to solve, not obstacles to avoid." Her words stuck with him long after they hung up. For so much of his life, Ethan had doubted his worth, convinced that his skills weren't enough to make a real impact. But Clara saw value in what he did, in the way he poured his heart into fixing cars and teaching kids. Her belief in him was like fuel, igniting a fire he hadn't realized was smoldering inside. As summer approached, bringing warmer days and longer evenings, Ethan received another letter from Clara. This one wasn't about finances or scholarships. It was an invitation. She wanted him to join her at a charity gala in the city, an event hosted by her firm to raise funds for educational initiatives. At first, Ethan hesitated. A fancy dinner surrounded by wealthy donors and influential people sounded about as appealing as walking barefoot through snow, but Clara insisted, reminding him that his story was exactly the kind of inspiration the attendees needed to hear. "You've already changed lives, Ethan," she told him during one of their calls. "Imagine what might happen if more people hear your story. You could inspire others to take action too." Reluctantly, Ethan agreed. Over the next few weeks, he prepared for the event, borrowing a suit from a friend and practicing a short speech Clara encouraged him to give. On the day of the gala, nerves gnawed at him as he boarded the train to the city. What if he stumbled over his words? What if no one cared about what he had to say? When he arrived, Clara greeted him outside the venue, looking stunning in a sleek, black gown. Seeing her calmed his racing thoughts. "You look great," she said with a reassuring smile. "And don't worry, you'll do fine." The evening unfolded like a scene from a movie. The ballroom was elegant, with crystal chandeliers casting soft light over tables adorned with fresh flowers. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and discussing causes close to their hearts. Ethan felt out of place at first, but Clara stayed by his side, introducing him to everyone she knew. To his surprise, people were genuinely interested in his story. They asked questions about the mentoring program, marveled at his dedication, and praised Clara for her role in supporting him. When it was time for speeches, Clara took the stage, first speaking passionately about the importance of investing in rural communities. Then she turned to Ethan, gesturing for him to join her. As he walked up to the microphone, his palms sweaty and his heart pounding, he glanced at Clara for reassurance. She gave him a subtle nod, her expression calm and encouraging. Hi," Ethan began, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm not used to talking in front of crowds like this, so bear with me." The audience chuckled, easing some of his tension. "What I want to say is, sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything. For me, that person was Clara. She didn't just give me money, she gave me hope. Hope that I could build something meaningful, something that helps others." He paused, scanning the room. Faces stared back at him, attentive and curious. "I grew up in a small town where opportunities can feel scarce. But I learned that even in tough places, people have potential. All they need is a chance to learn, to grow, to prove themselves. That's why I started the mentoring program. And that's why I believe in Clara's vision. Together, we can create opportunities for people who might otherwise get overlooked." By the time he finished, the room erupted in applause. Ethan stepped back, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Clara hugged him tightly, whispering, "You were amazing." As the night wore on, Ethan found himself relaxing, chatting with guests, who approached him to congratulate him on his speech. One woman, a philanthropist with a passion for education, expressed interest in funding additional programs in Maple Ridge. Another man, a tech entrepreneur, offered to donate laptops for the kids in the mentoring group. Ethan left the gala overwhelmed, not by the glamour or the attention, but by the realization that his story had resonated with people who had the power to make a difference. The next morning, as Ethan boarded the train back to Maple Ridge, he reflected on the whirlwind of the past 24 hours. Attending the gala had been daunting, but it had also been transformative. He'd seen firsthand the ripple effect of kindness, how one act of generosity could spark countless others. And he deepened his bond with Clara, whose unwavering support had given him the courage to step far outside his comfort zone. Back home, life resumed its usual rhythm, but with a new sense of purpose. Ethan continued expanding the mentoring program, fueled by the connections he'd made in the city. Meanwhile, Clara kept pushing forward with her foundation, inspired by Ethan's determination and humility. Their partnership evolved into something greater than either of them had anticipated, a collaboration rooted in trust, mutual respect, and a shared desire to uplift others. Neither of them knew exactly where this journey would lead, but one thing was clear: they were building something extraordinary together. And as Ethan stood in his bustling repair shop, surrounded by the laughter of kids learning to rebuild engines, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for Clara, for the opportunities she'd given him, and for the chance to pay it forward in ways he'd never imagined possible.